All right, guys, the final score is back again tonight. And guys, this is going to be one of those interviews that really interests me. When I looked up stuff about this guy has experience in just about every, and I just found out before we went on air, the one place I didn't think he had experience in, he does have experience in every football organization you can think of from the 70s right on up to present day. I'm talking about Mr. Michael Keller. He has experience in the NFL, college football, of course, the old World Football League, which some of you guys probably don't remember, World League of American Football, and yes, the USFL, which we love the USFL, and the XFL, which is about to make its comeback. But he was in it. He was in the first incarnation of the XFL, and we welcome him to the show tonight. Welcome to the show, Mr. Keller.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted and pleased that you chose to give me a call to work with you.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a sports nut. I have been since I was old enough to know what sports was, and football has always been my thing and my love. And you know, at an early age, I started learning about it, and probably I was told several years ago that I knew more useless information than anybody this guy knew. So now, you know, I guess I'll put it to use now. So, but I do appreciate you being on the show.
You were a plethora of useless facts.
Exactly. There you go. All right, let's just get right into it. Okay, you grew up what, in Detroit? Or
no, I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Okay. Yeah, my whole family was originally from Chicago, and my dad moved up. I was actually born in Elmhurst, Illinois, and just outside of Chicago, and moved up to Michigan when I was just a toddler, a 4 or 5 year old, and lived in Grand Rapids, until I went away to the University of Michigan. So it's I consider that to be my home, and it's really a nice place. It's a great family town, and has a lot going for it.
Right. So. Now, when you were growing up, were you like the alpha athlete? You know, did you play all three sports, or was football?
Well, I played just about everything. You know, there was a time when I was in a neighborhood with a bunch of kids, and good Lord, we played basketball from sun up to sundown at one time of the year, and then the next we'd move into football when football was going. And I actually started playing organized football when I was about 8 or 9 years old. You know, playing in those Pee Wee leagues.
Right.
And so it, then it goes from there. And then I played. I was too big to play for my. I went to a parochial school and had a real good city league of football. But I was too big. You had to be under 130, and when I was more than that when I was in 7th grade. So, so I concentrated on basketball, and basketball actually became my top sport. I was probably more heavily recruited for college in basketball than I was in football.
Wow.
And I was recruited highly in football too, but basketball, and I was all city and all state, in high school, but I kind of looked at myself and I did a little, quick analysis, and I was 6'3" or so, a little more maybe, and I knew playing forward and center that I was just going to be an undersized guy unless I became a guard or a forward, but I was recruited by all the Southeast Conference teams, the North Carolinas and
wow.
William and Mary's and all along and throughout Michigan, but I decided at that point that football was probably going to be my better sport because I'd be a big linebacker at 6'3.5" than being a small forward. So that became my direction, and I was recruited for football all over the place as well. My older brother went to Notre Dame, and so I really wanted to play for Notre Dame, and they offered me. They didn't offer me a scholarship. They wanted me to be a preferred walk-on is what they called it.
Right.
And with 30 or 40 scholarship offers, full ride scholarships, we had 8 kids, and my dad was going to try to educate all of us, and I just said I just couldn't do that to go to even though he wanted me to go to Notre Dame. He was kind of
right.
He was one of those subway alums for Notre Dame. And I said, no, Dad, I'm going to take the best. I'm going to go to the best place I can with the best education, and a place where maybe I'll play, maybe I won't. And I chose Michigan, and it was the greatest decision I ever made as a young guy.
Yeah. So, what was that? Pretty much the deciding thing, not getting what you thought you should have got from Notre Dame. Was that pretty much what made you decide on Michigan, or was there another factor?
Well, I was disappointed. I was disappointed because my first choice was to play for Notre Dame. I mean, right. I used to hitchhike. When I was in high school, I'd hitchhike down to Notre Dame games and bum a ticket and go into the games. And I mean, it was the damnedest thing. But my folks didn't even know I was doing it. And Grand Rapids was about 300 miles away from South Bend. But I just go out to the freeway, and I'd always hitch a ride with somebody who was heading down to the Notre Dame game, and they got to know who I was, and I'm out on the freeway hitchhiking, and I always was taken right down to the stadium, and I'd bum a ticket and go into the game, and there's always tickets around, and watch the game, and then I'd hitchhike back.
Wow.
And so I was a dedicated Notre Dame follower, but as I got older, I realized there's more to it than that, and when the scholarship, I had full rides at so many schools. I mean, I just couldn't lay that on my dad. We had 8 kids, and all of us got college educations, and he had to pay for a good portion of them. But I was, with a full ride scholarship, I took the burden of him having to put me through. So, and it was a good decision too. I mean, I was recruited by a fellow named Bump Elliott, and I didn't really have any ties to Michigan whatsoever. But once you're there for a little bit, you get Mason blue in your blood, and that happened to me, and it happened to my whole family. All my younger brothers all went to Michigan as well, and my younger sister. So we went from a Notre Dame family to a Michigan family.
That's quite a switch there. I mean, because considering there is some sort of a rivalry between Notre Dame and Michigan, so that's kind of a switch there.
Well, it's been a great rivalry, and it's been on for
years,
a century or so.
Yeah.
Michigan was always a top team with Fielding, H. Yost, and of course with Newt Rockne and the whole history of Notre Dame. I mean,
right.
They were top teams, always in the top 10 or vying for number 1, and it's been that way. And both schools have gone through dry spells, but if you look at it over the course of the years, they've been 2 of the great schools for college football historically, and their reputations are almost unmatched.
Yeah. What was your first thoughts when you got to Michigan? First impression.
Well, first it was so big. Secondly, the class that I was with, I looked at these guys and I said, how the heck did they recruit me compared to all these guys? I mean, they're all state guys, and they're all American, high school players, and I felt, really kind of out of place. And we started out, we probably had 50 or 60 guys on the depth chart for our freshman team. Freshmen couldn't play at that time.
Right.
I don't know if you remember.
That's right. Yes, sir.
But you couldn't play as freshmen, so we had the freshman team, and we scrimmaged against the varsity. But I was 6th or 7th on the depth chart at my position when I first got there, and I thought, well, at least I'm going to get my education, even though I may never see the field. And but then I kept matriculating up through the depth chart till finally, we played 2 games as freshmen. That's all they allowed us to play. And we played Toledo and in Miami of Ohio. And but I worked my way up to the point that I started, when I was a freshman in those 2 games. And then we started, going into sophomore year, and I said, I'm just glad to be part of the team and get my scholarship and get a great education. And I was a good student, so that was important to me.
Yeah.
And I took on a really heavy, classroom load because my goal was to, even then, was to go to law school at the University of Michigan, which has a great law school. And but things happen. It's kind of a strange thing, but I was at the bottom of the depth chart again, heading into fall practice for our sophomore year. And by the way, that was Bo Schembechler's first year.
That was going to be my next question. Bo Schembechler, you did
well,
first year.
Bo came in, and he ripped and tore, boy. I mean, he was a Tasmanian devil, and he was the meanest, orneriest son of a gun you've ever seen in your life, and he started the thing saying those who stay will be champions, which is still one of the mottos, that Michigan uses all the time, and he started saying that because we started out with about 125 guys on the roster in that sophomore year, and by the time we kicked off our first game against Vanderbilt, there was only 72 guys left on the squad. It was so hard and so rough. I mean, so that's where those who stay will be champions, because it wasn't going to get easier, but he had to challenge those who had any kind of courage, to stick it out, because he said, we're going to be good, and well, it turned out to be true. Even though we started out the season kind of rough, we lost 2 games in the first 5. Yeah, but we won the remaining 5 games, including that famous Ohio State game of 1969, when Ohio State had won 26 straight games, where the unrivaled champions of the NCAA, and they came in Michigan Stadium, and we ran them out of the stadium and knocked them off, and they still call it the greatest game in Michigan football history, where we caused that upset in front of, by the way, at the time, the largest crowd ever to watch a college football game.
I was going to say,
it was pretty
103,588. Yeah, that's a.
Well, of course, now they're over 110 every game, but then Michigan had a big stadium, always did, but throughout the season, we started out with only about 40,000 in the stadium, and then as we won, it started filling up till at the end of the game and end of the season. For Ohio State, you couldn't get a ticket, and they've been sold out ever since. So we were part of establishing the University of Michigan, sold out, 110,000 fans, starting with that game against Ohio State. So
yeah,
it's kind of I look back on it and I think what a great time to have been there, to be able to be part of establishing what is really putting Michigan into the very top echelon of schools in the United States playing football.
Yeah, definitely. And what a tradition in Michigan. It looks like Michigan has got itself back on track, too, with Harbaugh there. Looks like he's doing a pretty good job there. Although, it seems like, and I don't know how you feel about it, but it seems like when it gets to near the end of the season, they kind of slack. I won't call it slack off, but they have trouble at the end of the year. Yeah, but
well, they had a real problem with Ohio State, and
yes,
and that's got to get corrected, and and I think I can't explain. I mean, Michigan's had good teams, Ohio State's had good teams, but it just seems that they just had a tough time over the past 10 years or so with Ohio State. The same as it was before we got to Michigan. There was they had a rough time with just about everybody, and I think Harbaugh is he understands what it takes.
Yep.
And he's slowly building it, and he's a great recruiter. I think he's putting the kind of talent on the team that he needs, and I think that he's been kind of toying or with the coaching staff to get the coaching staff to where it should be, and I think they're pretty much there now. I think this is going to be a good year.
Yeah.
I think they'll they're always going to win 10 or 11 games. I mean that's just goes without saying, but they got to win that last one. That's
right.
The key.
Hey, you finish up your career at Michigan. You guys were pretty dominant that year. You were, I think you were third team All-American, first team All Big Ten. You guys win 10 in a row to start the year, and then here comes Ohio State, that last game of the season. You drop to them 14-11, but just that season that
well, we only our group in 3. Yeah, and our group in 3 years only lost like 5 games. So we were good. Of course, back then, you could only the Big Ten schools could only play in the Rose Bowl.
Right.
So, and you couldn't repeat. So, if you win it one year and you won the Big Ten one year, and then you win it the next year, the second place team goes Okay,
Yeah.
so the fact that we went to 2 Rose Bowls was the most that anybody could ever go to, and there weren't any other bowl games that the Big Ten
Oh
could go
no,
to.
there
So
wasn't
it was the Rose Bowl or nothing.
Yeah,
back
they
then.
didn't have 60 bowl games like they have nowadays, where everybody. It seems like everybody gets to go to a bowl game now.
There was only 4 or 5 of them. You know, the Rose, the Sugar, the the Cotton. Maybe the Gator Bowl was going then. And, I mean, it was pretty slim pickings on the Rose on the bowl games. But now, they got 40 bowl games. You know,
and to understand,
they don't even know what to call them. They run out of names.
They run out of names now because they come up with some ridiculous names now. But to understand how dominant that team was that year, you were 11-1, outscored opponents 421 to 83, and you were ranked number 4 at the final coaches poll. So not a bad senior year, just that one.
No, and you know what really grinds us was that we lost that Rose Bowl to Stanford. And Stanford was a pretty good team, but we should never have lost that game, and we lost by 1 point, 13-12. So we were dominant, for the entire season up until the last quarter, and we lost by 1 stinking point that took away our undefeated. I mean, we'd have declared ourselves national champs, that's what Bo said. But we didn't win it. You got to win them all.
So.
And then I went and played in the college All-Star game, which they don't play anymore. But that was quite an honor.
Yeah, there was
the college All-Star game.
The Chicago All-Star.
Well, it began in the. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Chicago College All-Star game where y'all played the Cowboys.
Yeah, well, they started the All-Star game back in the 1930s, and back in the 1930s, college football was actually bigger than pro ball, bigger than the National Football League.
Right.
And so it was quite a feat that the NFL was able to get the All-Star game to be able to play against the college guys, because that's who was more followed than the NFL was. And of course, all that changed where the NFL got bigger and bigger. So finally, they called a halt to it because they said we don't need this anymore, and so they discontinued it. But it was a great chance. I mean, I was one of arguably the 40 best players in the country to be named to the team, and I started that game as well. So going against the Cowboys, of course, the Cowboys drafted me. So I was playing right over Mike Ditka, the entire game, and we just were beating the hell out of each other the whole time. Because he said, hey Ricky, I'm gonna teach you what it's like to be in the NFL, and I said, okay, old timer, let's go at it. And what? One of the interesting things about that with Ditka is that his middle name is Keller, which is a family name for them.
Yeah.
So his name is Mike Keller Ditka, and of course I'm Mike Keller. So I mean, we became good friends over the years, and because we said that. We're distantly related.
So yeah, like you said, you get drafted by the Cowboys, 3rd round, 64th overall pick in the 72 draft. And they wanted to convert. You played like a defensive end at Michigan, but they wanted to convert you to a linebacker, right? Yeah,
but I was a stand-up defensive end. Okay.
Yeah,
so, we called it a defensive end, but it was a linebacker position. We need to make that clear. It wasn't like I was, going from a hand on the ground to a stand-up position. No, I was a stand-up defensive end. We played that Okie angle defense, and I was always an anchor end or whatever, playing strong side linebacker at that time, or a defensive end, and so it wasn't that big a
big of a switch.
Yeah.
No. So you get to play in about 5 games, and they send you to the taxi squad so they can activate Roger Staubach.
Well, I got to know Roger real well. In fact, my wife and I used to babysit his kids when he traveled during the off season. So we became real close, and that was a great team. They were great guys. The only interesting thing I can say, I didn't distinguish myself as a player with the Cowboys. For one, I ran into an injury problem and stuff. I tore up a shoulder that kind of affected it. But the only interesting thing that came about my stay with the Cowboys was I got to know Gil Brandt was the head of the personnel department for the Cowboys. Sir. And he was a neighbor, so I got to, he used to ask us over to his house, my wife and I, and we'd go over for the holidays and stuff. So I really got to know Gil well. And when I got injured, Gil said, because I went into him and I said, I can't sit around. Even in the off season, I got to get a job. You guys don't pay me enough that this can just be a football thing, and because I got to make more money. And so I interviewed for a couple of jobs, and then one day he asked me into the office, and he and Tex Schramm, and he said, Mike, we like you. We like the way you represent yourself and stuff, and we want you. Would you be interested in scouting for us? And I said, heck yeah. And so I was probably the first time before or since in the history of the National Football League, I was an active player who scouted for the team during the off season. So in effect, I was out there looking for players to replace myself with.
That's pretty cool. So that just led to
obviously I was a better scout than I was a linebacker. So I found too many other good linebackers.
How long did you do the scouting for the Cowboys?
Well, I was there. I did it for 2 seasons or two off seasons because even though I didn't make much of a mark, I still, I went on the practice squad, midway through the first season. Then the second season, I got hurt. I tore up my shoulder, and so I spent the year on injured reserve. And then my third year, I went to training camp, made the team, but then, then I got let go, not long after. So I just went into the scouting department. And then, midway through the season, the number one scout for the Cowboys, a fellow named Dick Mansberger, was hired as the personnel director for the Seattle Seahawks, which was in '75.
Right.
And which was the expansion franchise. And I was the first guy he hired, so I was the fourth guy hired in starting up the Seattle Seahawks franchise.
Well, you definitely had a lot of new starts as far as...
I was in the right place at the right time, and I probably schmoozed myself into the right spots, but no matter what happened, it was a great opportunity. I was in on the ground floor of the team, and I scouted for a couple of seasons, and then I was promoted to assistant general manager, and really loved it. I mean, I love Seattle. I like to hunt, and I like to fish, and it's a wonderful state, for outdoor activities, and I really loved it. I loved being with the Seahawks organizations. The Nordstrom family were great owners, and we had a great group of, we went out there and got, the Jim Zorns and the Steve Largents and the Sherman Smiths, and
yeah,
those were all my guys. I mean, I scouted every single one of them and was heavily involved in them being with the team, and we did a pretty good job. In our third year, they didn't cut us any slack as an expansion team. We had to fight it out like everybody else, and by our third year, we had a winning team, and we were battling for the playoffs. So that's really remarkable when you look at the Tampa Bay Bucks came in at the same time. And I don't think they got into the play or had a winning season for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, they started off. I think it was, if I saw, and I believe I was just watching 30 for 30. Did they lose the first 26 games?
Yeah, they were pathetic. Yeah.
And they weren't very good.
John McKay, the old SC coach, was their head coach.
Yeah. So you leave there.
They couldn't get out of their own way, and we were quite different. We were competitive almost right from the beginning, and because we got good players, and Jack Kutera was our coach. He came from the Vikings, and played a very conservative style of ball, but he didn't throw games away and played smart, and we had some good young players that made things happen, and that's what it's all about.
So after you finish your time in Seattle, you 83. You go to work at this new football league, the USFL, United States Football League, which I can remember. I can remember as a kid thinking, I was like 10 years old at the time. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have football year round. So I was like, of course, I was all for it. I loved the USFL. I can still remember watching the USFL, the first championship game. I think it was, and I can't remember if they were named, if it was the Philadelphia Stars or the Baltimore Stars at the time. But it was Philadelphia, Michigan, I think. Michigan Panthers. I knew that.
Well, and I was the vice president of football operations for the Michigan Panthers.
Exactly. You had something to do with that team.
Yeah, I had a little bit to do with it. Well, I put that team together, and good Lord, we were good right from the start. Of course, I think we were further ahead with other teams. We had an owner named Alfred Taubman, and he was a shopping mall magnate, and he had more money than he knew what to do with. He was the same as he and Eddie DeBartolo. The DeBartolo family made all their money in the shopping center business.
Right.
So, he went head to head with the DeBartolos in the shopping center business, and of course we worked in the National Football League when DeBartolos were with San Francisco. But he gave us all the tools we needed to put together a good team, and we went out and like I said, we went out and got a lot of really good young talent. Bobby Hebert, Ray Bentley. If you look at the guys that came off that team that went on to play in the NFL, I would say that probably 1/3 of the team went on and played in the NFL, which is a staggering amount of players that we had and developed. And Jim Stanley was our coach and did a great job. And we won the championship that first year, and we did and beat Jim Moore and his group with the Philadelphia Stars.
Yeah,
and ironically, Jim Moore was on the staff with me with the Seattle Seahawks.
Oh.
So when I went to the Michigan Panthers, he took the head coaching job with Carl Peterson over with the Philadelphia Stars. So, football is amazingly, we're inbred. All of us have worked at some point in time with other people, and the good ones last, and the bad ones don't hang around very much longer.
So, we were talking about before we started the interview, some of the guys you got. Of course, if you watch the Michigan Panthers, you talked about Bobby Hebert, Ray Bentley. Anthony Carter was probably one of the superstars of that team. He went on to be with the Michigan Vikings. Of course, he came from the University of Michigan. But you also rated one of my teams, my favorite team. I told you I was a diehard Steelers fan. And you rated the Steelers' offensive line there. You got some great offensive
we did.
line.
Well, that's one of the things. Well, one of the things we realized, we had all these young guys, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and we had an offensive line that wasn't couldn't protect them. So again, Al Taubman said, "What can we do to fix it?" And I said, "Well, we'll just go out and get players. We'll get them from the NFL." And he says, "Is that going to be costly?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, go do it. I don't care what it costs." And we didn't. But the NFL, the average salary in the NFL was only about $75,000.
Yeah, it wasn't anywhere close to what it is now.
Because there was no competition.
Exactly.
And it was, every player in the National Football League should bow down and give homage to the United States Football League because we forced by us going in, and we took 3 members of the starting offensive line out from the Steelers. If you look at who we took, we also got a defensive back, but we took 3 out of the 5 offensive starters, from the Steelers, Ray Pinney, Tyrone McGriff, and Tom Dornbrook, and all of a sudden, within a week, we had a dominant running game, and we had and they protected Bobby Hebert, which allowed him to distribute the ball, and then we started kicking everybody's butt and won the championship.
Yeah. How was it approaching these NFL players? Was it easy, or were they kind of skeptical about it?
Oh, it was. They were calling us. They were, like I said, they were only averaging. They were averaging $100,000, $150,000, and we were paying them over $200,000 apiece. So they came to us. They took the money. They were tired of they saw other guys in the USFL making money, and they came to us and said, we were looking for people, and we had kind of an inside. We had a by with the Steelers, who called me up and said, hey, these guys, if you want them, you can get them. And so, we worked clandestinely, behind the scenes, and of course they are all working on like 1-year contracts. So we just went out and signed them for the next year, and they came and played for us. And the fact is that that they'd worked together for so long. When they came out of the team, they were running the the sweep stuff and the pulling guards. I mean, they'd all worked together so often, so long.
They knew what to do.
They never missed a beat. They came in and were starters and productives right off the bat. And of course, now they were protecting our quarterback, and so he was having time to get the ball to our great young receivers. And also, we had Ken Lacey, who went on to play in the NFL. It made him a 1,500-yard rusher. So all of a sudden, we were kind of an afterthought in the league, and suddenly, nobody could beat us.
Yeah. So you also worked for the Oakland Invaders, right?
Well, that was the Michigan Panther team.
Oh, so they moved. Yeah.
Yeah, what happened was the Silverdome was where we played, and the Lions played, and the USFL was talking at that time about moving to the fall. Okay, and we knew that if we stayed, we were going to have to move at some point anyway, because the Lions would have first claim, to the Silverdome. So we started looking at moving, and the owner of the Oakland Invaders and my guy said, well, shoot, let's. So what we did is we just combined the teams, and which we kept the best of the Oakland Invaders, which there weren't that many compared to the number of guys that we brought from the Michigan Panthers. But the Michigan Panthers were the Oakland Invaders.
Okay. So
just from a historical standpoint, we changed our name, but basically we were the Michigan Panthers.
So after the famous lawsuit against the NFL that went wrong and the USFL dismantles, where did you go after that?
Well, just a side note about that, the lawsuit against the NFL, who's the driving force behind that?
Yes, I do. Mr. Trump.
Donald Trump. Donald Trump was the owner of the New Jersey Generals.
Yeah.
And what a name, New York, New Jersey. Anyway, he convinced all of, and that's when the move to the fall was being, we couldn't get stadiums and all that kind of stuff, and so we sued. Donald Trump, leading the group, sued the National Football League for antitrust, and the fact is that it was in a court of law, the NFL was guilty, determined to be guilty of antitrust practices. But they said that the USFL had, been so rapacious in their actions that they did to force the deal, that they were not, they were guilty, but there was no damages. There was only $1, which was in antitrust is trebled. So the USFL got $3, and that in effect wrecked the league. I mean, it ended the league.
Do you think
the league had not played for 2 years, expecting to win the lawsuit and get several $100 million, and then they would come back and play in the fall and and go from there.
Do you think if you hadn't tried to go head to head, that USFL would have been around for a long time?
Oh yeah, no question.
Yeah, I think so too.
It was because our attendance was pretty good. We only averaged around 30,000 in the first season, but we were 45,000, 50,000 by the time in our third year, and and all the teams were starting to get better attendance, and that's what kind of made them feel that now's the time we move into the fall, and I guess the thought process was that the fall is when you need to play football,
right?
And that's when all the TV. That's when they want the TV. See, trying to do the TV in the spring, you had baseball, you still had basketball, the NBA. There were too many. We didn't have all the channels that you have now. ESPN had just started. ESPN actually did us in the USFL, but we were one of their first products.
Right.
And but you just didn't have the number of stations or number of networks, and so there wasn't. And the NFL had them tied up. Well, that was part of the antitrust deal too, but you just didn't have the choices and the number of that you could have. So it was a shame that it went belly up. And,
yeah.
And they just shut the doors. So, 1 week we were working, and the next week he says, "Good luck. Here's an apple on the roadmap. Good luck with the rest of your life."
Yeah, I've gone back, with, of course, with social media and things like YouTube. There's several of the USFL games on YouTube that I've gone back and watched and really enjoyed. Brought back a lot of memories, and some of the guys I didn't realize that went on in the NFL. There was a lot of guys I did realize had great careers in the NFL. Of course, the Jim Kellys, the Reggie Whites, Steve Young, but it was a lot of the I guess you call the second tier guys I did realize started out in the NFL, and going back and watching those games has been real. It's brought back a lot of memories for me. And I was really upset when the USFL went away because football year round for me, I was like, this is great, but you can't always get what you want.
It wasn't to be at the time, but we did establish the fact that spring football could work.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So that's what led, not long after that. When I finished up there, I'm not sure what I did. I think I went back to the NFL and then ended up with the World League of American Football. I think that came afterwards.
Yeah,
And which was great. We had 7 teams in the United States, and we had 3 teams over in Europe, and it was really kind of fun because those were some long plane trips. You'd go over and they'd try to schedule you for maybe a couple of games over there, and which was fun. But if you had to come back, it was really the travel was what was one of the death knells of the recent World League of American Football.
Yeah,
we had a team in Canada. I think we had 2 or 3 teams. We had Frankfurt and Amsterdam, the Amsterdam Admirals and the London Monarchs. And then they just they shut it down for a year, and I went to work. I actually worked directly for Roger Goodell at that time because we started working almost immediately on developing the NFL Europe is what we call it.
Right.
The next stage, and I worked right with Roger on redistributing. I went over the. See, I'd done one of the things I'd done for the World League and did the city study. Analyzing the different markets on where we should put franchises.
Right.
And so because I had a lot of experience with that. That's one of the things I did over in Europe. So I went all through Europe. You had to have the population. You had to have, people who you felt would be interested in American football. You had to have the right stadiums. Because we wanted it to be big time. Not, a lot of the stadiums over there are soccer stadiums. They're 25, 30,000, and that wasn't going to be good enough for us. So. But we went over there, and of course Germany had always been a great American. I keep saying American football because when we got over there with NFL Europe, if you say football, everybody over in Europe is thinking soccer.
That's right.
Okay, so we every time we would preface it, we had to say, well, the American football. So they knew what we were talking. Or they would call it gridiron over there or something, but we had to call it American football. Otherwise, they thought we were talking about something else.
Now you say when you would go look at cities for the World League. I just remember us having the Raleigh-Durham Skyhawks. And did you have anything to do? I'm sure you had something to do with Raleigh-Durham getting a team.
Well, I did. I went through probably 20 markets, I'd go to Raleigh-Durham. I'd go to, a couple of places in Florida. We knew a lot about the NFL spots, but a lot of my evaluation was going to, the places that did not have NFL football.
Right.
And going and, Oklahoma was one of them. I can't remember all of them, but but I would go in and out, evaluate the marketplace and the stadiums, and I had the Chamber of Commerce and the Convention and Visitors Bureau guys will be with me, and they're loading me up with information, and they're trying to sell their cities because they wanted us to come in there because it meant jobs and it meant money and everything else. So I was kind of the king of the road, and I'd go in, they'd wine and dine me but show me everything. But I knew what I needed to see, and I needed to get in and look, and I had to know the demographics and the economics, and if it could support, and if there was any kind of a football culture that we knew that would buy into what we were doing. And you really had to do that with the World League or the NFL Europe when we got over there, because we were going into some markets that didn't know whether an American football was pumped or stuffed. So now it had always been pretty big in Germany. So in Germany we didn't worry about. We had Hamburg. We had to choose from. We had Dusseldorf. We had which we had a team there, the Rhine Fire they called it, rather than Dusseldorf. That's a little bit too big of a mouthful. But we didn't go to, of course, Berlin was still the Iron Curtain, So, we weren't going to go over that part of Eastern Europe or Eastern Germany. But the Germans loved American football, and they'd been following it for a long time before that. And there was a lot of, they had high school football, and they had a culture of football over there in Europe. So that was easy. And of course, we went to Amsterdam, which was I spent probably spent a year in Amsterdam and a year in Frankfurt, in the process of building up and getting us ready to go over there. And I'll tell you what, Amsterdam, you talk about a wide open city. That place is absolutely nuts. I mean, you talk about, drugs in the United States, and I mean, you go into any place over there, and they're all sitting around smoking marijuana. It was legal. I mean, you can walk down the street, and you got a doobie going on, and I was looking around. I had the heebie-jeebies, thinking, geez, the police are going to be all over us. But no, it was legal. And but Amsterdam, the one thing I will say about Amsterdam. And they supported their team really well. Coach Luginbill was the coach there. I don't know if you know, but he was a great coach. He coached at San Diego, University of San Diego, and San Diego State, I should say. And anyway, Luginbill was the coach, and Amsterdam, of any city that I've ever been in, had the most beautiful women of any city of its size that I've ever seen. You can jot that down.
I'll make sure I jot that down, put it in my
I'm a married man, but I'll tell you, don't tell your wife. But anyway, the most beautiful women in all of Europe, from a totality standpoint. So anybody who's out there listening, if you're a young male and you want to take a trip to Europe, put Amsterdam on your but it had great art, and it had great history. And that was one of the neat things I love, because I'm a big history fan.
Right.
And being over in Europe and being able on my days off to tour it, and I bought a Harley Davidson when I was over there, and so I went all through Europe and Scotland and Ireland on the back of a Harley Davidson.
Wow.
It was a lot easier to travel. That's why you see so many people on motorcycles over there, because there's no parking. There's no place to park. And so it was great memories for me, because I had a terrific time.
Yeah. So the next big venture after NFL Europe, this one. Now I'll go ahead and tell you, I have followed wrestling since 1985. So I know Vince McMahon. He's a businessman. He actually went to East Carolina University, which is close by me. What did you think when you get this? And I don't know if Vince called you himself or somebody called you from Vince's place, from WWF, saying,
it was Basil DeVito. The guy that called me was Basil DeVito, and actually it was through they hired a search group And it just so happened that the search firm that approached me, the guy that ran it was a guy named Joe Bailey. You don't know who Joe Bailey is, but Joe Bailey was Tex Schramm's right-hand man for about 30 years with the Dallas Cowboys. So anyway, Joe knew, my background and knew me, and I used to go to Christmas parties with him when I was with the Cowboys. And he said, Mike, what are you doing? And I said, well, at that point, I had gone back to Grand Rapids, and I started the Grand Rapids Sports Council.
Okay.
Bringing various sports activities, games, teams, whatever, into Grand Rapids. And, sports councils do. They build up the sports in the area for the benefit of the business community and for the fans and the people. And but anyway, he called me up, and I've been doing it for about a year and a half, and I was really enjoying it. Coming back in my hometown. And he called me up and he said, Mike, I got an offer for you, and are you sitting down? And I said, yeah, I'll sit down. And he says, you know who Vince McMahon is? And I said, well, vaguely. He's a wrestling guy. And he said, yeah, well, he wants to start a football league, and he wants you to come in and help put it together. Well, it turns out I was the first guy they hired. I was the first guy hired by Vince McMahon, and they flew me out. They sent their jet for me, and which was always impressive when somebody sends a jet for you.
Yeah. And
flies me back to Connecticut where he was, and he says, I want to do this. I want to do it right. I think you're the right guy to do the job, and I'm going to give you a blank check. You go do what you need to do, which it wasn't a blank check, but he always got us what we needed. And I was, I was just, the guy is just a dominant personality. I mean, he's, I enjoyed every minute of working for him. And, he was always, he was really tough with a lot of his people, but he never came down on us. Well, he saw how hard we worked. He saw how diligent we were in the league office and throughout the league. And so he never criticized anything that we did. He may question it, but he never criticized. And I'll tell you, I will say this, eventually, I left him, but they took great care of me, and I had nothing but good things to say about Vince McMahon. And I learned a little bit about wrestling because I was hanging out with a lot of wrestling guys.
They were making appearances.
And yes, they were. And of course, Dwayne Johnson played football at Miami.
Yeah,
he was a football player before he went into the wrestling gig. And so they were all they loved it. All the wrestlers and even the female wrestlers and stuff. It was really a joy. The offices in Stamford, Connecticut, and all those guys were hanging around the office all the time. And they're always hanging around with us because they wanted to hang around with football guys. But it was fun. It was challenging. Again, it was spring football, and that would have been continued because Vince was, Vince is not a guy that cuts and runs.
No.
But he had a real bad experience. The reason the XFL ended the first time around was our TV partner was NBC. Now we also had the Paramount Network and TNT, I think, was in it. But the major was
NBC.
The NFL came in, and Vince is not a combative guy. You think he would be, but he really isn't. And NBC came in, and they said that the NFL has approached us about coming on board and doing doing games on Saturday or Monday or whatever it was. And Vince said, well, you guys, I was Dick Ebersol and Ken Shanzer and those guys with NBC. And we had a long-term contract with NBC for the XFL, but Vince let them out of it.
Wow.
And then what was even worse was that once he allowed NBC to vacate the contract, the Paramount Network, which I'm not sure what it's called today, it's still to this day, it's called something else, and TNT, they went in and they tried to steamroll Vince and say, we want to renegotiate our contracts since you're giving all this favorable treatment to NBC. And Vince says, screw you, screw your family, screw your businesses. and Vince just shut it down. He got pissed at the people he was working with. And what a sneeze.
Oh, that's all right. Bless you.
Yeah, excuse me. Anyway, so Vince, that's what Vince was. He just, even though we all looked at him and said, holy, Vince, it's not just, it's just not your ego or you get pissed off, but, we got all these teams and all these players and all these people, they're all out of jobs. But he paid, well, he didn't pay all the players and stuff like that. He just, in the league and the players were on their own, but he paid me for 2 more years, so he paid me to the end of my contract.
Wow.
So he took great care of me, and but it was a shame because we had he wanted to stir things up, and we did stir things up. We were. Oh
yeah, definitely.
The sports writers and everybody they thought, what the hell is this? But he didn't fool around. The football was good football.
Yes, it was.
We didn't go out and steal players. Go ahead.
Yeah, I watched it a lot. It was good football. I mean, the rules were different, and people, some of the old traditionalists didn't like that. They had some different things, but I didn't have a problem with that. You had some guys out there. Of course, I actually.
He went out and he wanted sexy cheerleaders. So Jake Howarth, who is an old friend of mine, who's done cheerleading groups in the NFL. And she went out and got the beautiful girls and put them in the sexy outfits. And, it was a diversionary method. Vince figured that it won't be good football for a year or two, but we'll dazzle them with all this other stuff. And I'll tell you what, I had more fun, with the XFL with the 2 year. We only played for 1 year, for God's sake.
Yeah.
But I was with them for 3 years, or 4 years when you count. I was paid for 2. I had more fun doing that than probably any job in football that I had prior to that. Because Vince was fun, the people we had really loved it, and they were having fun playing, and it was going to get better and better, but we just didn't have the time for it. And it wasn't that it was bad. It was going to get better and better, and we just didn't have time. Vince pulled the plug.
I had I've got a radio show that I do online, and one of the little trivia questions I asked the guy was, who was the only player to win an XFL championship and a Super Bowl? And I don't know if you know the answer to that.
Tommy.
You got the first
quarterback.
Tommy Maddox. Tommy Maddox,
yeah. Of course, I was getting there. I'd have gotten there.
Yeah, you'd have got
Tommy Maddox.
You'd got there, but yeah, we actually talked about it because we're and this current incarnation of the XFL, we've talked about it. The guy that is the co-host with me, we've talked about it a lot on our show. Some of the different rules that they're going to have. The one that really intrigues me is the overtime rules that they're talking about doing with kind of like a hockey shootout. Both teams, 44 men on the field at one time. One team's offense against another team's defense on one side of the field, and one team's defense and the other team's offense on the other side of the field. It's kind of like a shootout. That kind of intrigues me there, and some of the other rules we haven't. We're talking about doing a whole.
I tell you what, it may intrigue you, but at some point, I'm still a traditionalist.
Oh, I am too. But
and I know that Vince is going to come up with some goofy stuff, because he's trying to get people's attention, and I'm sure it'll be. I'm sure it'll be good because Vince will put his heart and soul into it, and I have no doubts. But I was not approached by them. I didn't approach them. I think they wanted a whole new crew in there. So I don't know if there's anybody that was with the XFL before the first XFL that's going to be part of the new XFL.
Right.
Which is the way Vince does things. He wants young blood. He doesn't want old farts like me, going in there.
Well, you definitely must have made an impact with him while you were there. That
Well, I'll tell you what. I call him from time to time. He always picks up the phone. We always have a good conversation.
Well,
and
that's awesome there.
I've spent holidays in his home with his lovely wife Linda and Shane and his daughter Stephanie and I was part of the family and he treated me such. So you'll never hear a cross word come from me to Vince, his family, or anything that he does. I know what he's all about, and he is a creative, smart, talented guy that is passionate about everything that he does. And God bless him. He's living life to the fullest.
Yeah. So what are you doing now?
What am I doing now? Well, I'm semi-retired right now. Although I've got a couple of I get approached by people wanting to start leagues all the time. I just don't know if I have the energy now to put into that and to do it as well as it needs to be done. Okay. So I have a beautiful home in northern Michigan on several acres. I'm right on the Muskegon River, which is a nice trout river. And I hunt and I fish. I go to Michigan games. I also do a little speaking for a group called Gig Masters.
Okay.
I give speeches to a lot of different types of groups all through the Midwest. And once in a while I drive for Uber. So when I kind of dabble in stuff, but I don't want to get into a 9 to 5 or. If you get into a sports deal, it's not 9 to 5. If you're going to be, the culture of football is that you spend 10, 12 hours a day doing it, and that's what you got to do to be successful. And I just don't have. I don't think I have the energy to go through that again.
All right, I got to ask you this. You're a big Michigan fan. What do you think? What's their chances this year? I know we talked a little bit about it earlier, but what do you think they're going to do this year?
Well, I think Michigan's got all the tools, and the Big Ten is a strong conference. No matter what you say, there's 5 teams in the Big Ten that will go on and play in bowl games, maybe more. I think they had 6 or 7 last year, and so you're every week you're playing against good teams. But I think Michigan is going to hold their own. I think it'll come down to the last game again against Ohio State. I don't know where they're playing this year, but I think Jim Harbaugh has been recruiting well, and I think the coaching staff is solid, and so I think Michigan's going to do well. But I know that Ohio State is strong again. So
it's going to be tough.
It'll always come down to that last game. And one thing I can claim is that when I was at Michigan, of course we couldn't play as freshmen, so we only had 3 years of varsity, but we beat those Dastardly Buckeyes 2 out of 3 years, and that was when they were the best. That was when they were the best team in college football.
Well, you had the big upset. I mean, you knocked them off the pedestal. That was.
We had the big one, and then we went down to we beat them in Michigan Stadium, and then in front of the largest crowd ever watched a college football game back then, and then we went down to Columbus the next year, and we lost. I think it was 20-10 or something like that. We were in that game right to the end, and then they came in Michigan Stadium my senior year, and they weren't as strong as they. And we had a good team, but they played us to a standstill, and we won. By scoring in the fourth quarter, so we won a close game. But we won 2 out of 3 from those sons of guns, and they can't take that away from me.
Oh no, they can't. I can tell that blood still bleeds with that rivalry there. You still, if you could get back out there,
it is. I love Michigan, and the University of Michigan. What a great institution. And of course, I scouted, after I played. So, I've been to Ohio State. I scouted Ohio State at Ohio State. And I know their facilities, and I know, the passion that they have. And of course, in Ohio, think about this. They've got only one major school, and that's Ohio State.
That's right.
Think about what Michigan, competes
Michigan
against.
State.
You've got Michigan State, Eastern, Western, and Central Michigan, which are all in the MAC, and then you got Notre Dame, which is right on the doorstep. So there's a lot of competition for the Michigan athletes, and I'm not making excuses. Jim Harbaugh is putting together a heck of a team, and the coaching staff, and I think they're going to start asserting themselves, and I think this is the year to start doing it.
Yeah, you made a valid point there. That is a good point there. They don't have much competition for recruits in the state of Ohio, so yeah, that's
no. I mean, they're only real. I mean, really, it's Michigan, that goes into Ohio very heavily, and Penn State goes into Ohio. Those are the only guys that they have to compete against, and normally Ohio State gets their pick.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Mr. Keller, I'm not going to take up any more of your time, but I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed talking to you tonight. I knew when I looked up all this stuff about you that I said, that's going to be a good interview there, and you haven't let me down a bit. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to do this, and I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you tonight.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'd be happy to join you anytime that you need, and if you need any help, securing some of these other guys that you might want to have on, call on me.
I sure will. I appreciate that.
I've got a lot of people that owe me favors, so
I will definitely
don't hesitate to call me.
I'll definitely do that. I'll take you up on that. I appreciate it. Maybe I'll tell you what. I'll try to have you on with the week before the Michigan-Ohio State game, and we'll talk about that a little bit. How about that?
That'd be great. I will be happy to throw a few barbs at those.
I know you would.
Buck nuts. those dastardly buck nuts.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Keller. Like I said, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Call me Mike.
Mike, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you doing this. It's been a great interview. I've really enjoyed it. Anytime I can find out stuff I didn't know before, you've told me a lot I didn't know before, and you definitely made an impact on a lot of different football organizations, and my hat's off to you. That's all of these places, USFL, the XFL, I enjoyed watching, and can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you. I've had a fun career, and I've worked with great people, and hell, even Donald Trump takes my calls. Not that I call him a lot, but I have called him a couple of times, and he does take my calls because he was. He owned a team in the, I don't know what the hell league it was, USFL.
USFL, yeah.
I probably spent 30-day-long meetings with Donald,
Wow.
And Brian, I'll give you one last little story, and that was, everybody used to kind of poke fun at him, and but he always wanted to be at the football operational meetings, and so he's in there, and I mean, I'm there with George Allen and guys like that, and they'd say, Trump, let me ask you a question. What the heck's going on with that hair of yours? That's the goofiest looking wig that I've ever seen in my life. And he said, no, it's my hair. Here, pull it. And they said, oh, we don't know what's crawling around in there. And so, but anyway, we used to take the piss out of him. But he was a pretty good sport about it, and I really liked the guy. So anyway, that's a parting little story for you.
I got you.
People.
I got you. Well,
thank you for having me. Like I said, I'm happy to help you out anytime, and good luck with your program. You do a great job. Great questions.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mike. And you have a great night.
Thank you. You too.
All right, guys. That is Mike Keller on the Final Score. And guys, we'll see you next week with another big interview on the Final Score.